Okay, so now that we've seen that the human anatomy, the human mouth anatomy is a major contributor in production of sounds and words, let us look how language and the brain are related. Now, as you see, there's a diagram on the right hand side which depicts your human brain. And first, let us begin with why language and the brain. So, there is a term called neurolinguistics, which is the study and the relationship between the language and the brain. So, your specific parts in the brain are related to language functions, and these specific parts in the brain that are related to the language functions are first, Broca's area, as you can see it on the right hand side in the diagram, which is depicted towards the left in blue. Broca's area is basically a discovery, or it is a name given after Paul Broca, who was a French surgeon in 1860s, and he reported that Broca's area, or the anterior speech cortex, that's the name given to this part of the body, of the brain, and he reported that in 1870s there was a damage. The people who suffered from a damage in this particular part, or this specific part of the brain, led to extreme difficulty for them in producing speech. So that became Broca's area. The finding was first used to argue the language ability must be located in the left hemisphere. This is the left hemisphere of the brain, and then since then it has been treated like an indication that Broca's area is crucially involved in the production of speech. Secondly is Wernicke's area, as you can see towards the right. So Wernicke's area is also called posterior speech cortex, or Wernicke's area. So Karl Wernicke was a German doctor who in the 1870s he reported that damage to this particular part of the brain was found among those patients who had speech comprehension difficulties, means it was difficult for them to understand or comprehend in terms of speech. So this finding was confirmed that the left hemisphere, so this belongs to the left hemisphere of the human brain. So the left hemisphere location of language ability led to the view that Wernicke's area is part of the brain crucially involved in understanding of speech. So we must know that these two parts of the human brain are involved in process of speech or language. Hence it becomes neurolinguistics. There is also so the human brain is also connected with the right ear and the left ear, specifically in terms of speech production. So it is called dichotic listening. So just to give an example, your right ear has an advantage for linguistic words. Why we say that? Because there was an experiment that was conducted in which the subjects, or the people who are being experimented upon, were made to sit with a set of earphones on and were given two different sound signals together simultaneously. So one through each earphone. So one earphone produced one kind of sound signal and the other kind of sound signal. So for example, if through one earphone came the syllable GA or the word dog, and through the other earphone at the exact same time came the word cat, when asked to say what was heard, the subjects more often correctly identified the sound that came via the right ear. This is known as the right ear advantage for linguistic sounds. So, right ear advantage would be that in this case, they were able to hear either dog or cat, whichever was plugged into whichever ear. The sound that was produced from the right ear, and hence right ear has an advantage for linguistic sounds. Similarly, your left ear is usually given in to non-verbal sounds, like when someone cups or there are birds singing. Definitely there is no speech production, but there are sounds, and hence left ear is given to it. Now you must understand that non-verbal sounds like your music, say it's just instrumental, or your traffic noises which are so confusing, or birds singing, they are all recognized more often with the left ear, which means they are processed faster via the right hemisphere. So simply put it, that human brain in the anatomy of the human brain, the right hemisphere is the first choice for non-language sounds, among other things, because right through your left ear, your voice goes, your sounds are given or signaled towards your right hemisphere. And through your right ear, the sounds move towards your left hemisphere of your brain, and it specializes in language sounds. So that is about language and the human brain. Okay, so now we come to the most interesting part, which is evolution of language. Don't you all wonder where did the first word appear, or who said the first word, or maybe didn't you ever investigate into the history of language? So in this PPT, in this particular slide, we'll consider how language evolved over ages. Now you must understand that philology is the term given to investigate the features of language, history, and the changes it has undergone over a substantial period of time. So we'll consider philology in this case specific to English language. So like I said, this PPT is specifically to discover the word formations, the origin of human language in reference to English language. Let us understand that English has gone through substantial changes to become English we use in today's world, in the modern day. So investigating features of older languages and the ways in which they developed into modern languages involves us in a study of language history and change, which is called philology. Now in the 19th century, philology dominated the study of language, and one result was the creation of family trees to show how languages were related. So you must understand that language not only has undergone substantial change, there was a huge variety on the plate of philologists to understand that there are so many languages and so many sources. So there are about 30 such language families containing more than 6,000 different individual languages. So while they were discovering the Indo-European family tree of language, Indo-European is the language family with the largest population and distribution in the world. But it isn't the only one. There are about 30 such languages, like I said, and they in itself contain 6,000 different individual languages. So let us just discover or understand what is the history of English language like. So history of English language is divided into 4 periods. First is the Old English period, or the way you have read Shakespeare. Shakespeare is written in Old English. It is anything before 1100. Then comes Middle English period, 1100 to 1500. Then early modern English between 1500 to 1700, and modern English everything after 1700. Now there are certain terminologies in philology, the study of investigating the features of language. Let us identify those terms to understand how the language evolution was studied. Now first is cognate. So the process of depicting the family tree of language is also depicting different languages involved, looking different languages that are involved. So cognate is that within the groups of related languages, we can often find close similarities in particular sets of words. So a cognate of a word in one language, example English, is a word in another language, example German, that has a similar form and is or was used with a similar meaning. So a word like Übermensch in German has a similar meaning to Superman in English, and that becomes a cognative word. A word in one language is a word in another language too. So that is cognate, and that is how philologists identified languages over a period of time. Then you must understand that there was a great vowel shift between 1400 to 1600. And what was the shift like? In between Chaucer and Shakespeare, English underwent this change. Example, raising of long vowel sounds like M-O-N-A to say M-O-O-N. That would be moon. So what happened was that the pronunciations of early modern English pronunciations beginning around 1500 significantly differ from earlier periods. How? The introduction of printing in 1476 brought about significant changes, but because the printers tended to standardize the pronunciations and the spelling of words, later pronunciation changes are often not reflected in the way modern English after 1700 is written. So, great vowel shift was one of the aspects of philologists discovering how language underwent changes. Now, there are also syntactic changes, which are changes in the natural structure of a language, which is syntactic changes. To describe it further, it could be that the subject could follow the verb, as in fared, he travelled, and the object could be placed before the verb, as in he saw him, or at the beginning of the sentence, as in him man me said, no man gave any to him. So basically the whole idea of syntactic changes in language is to discover how the natural language has been changed in structure. So say from Old English to modern English, you discover how the structure of the language changed. Fourth terminology in philology is semantic changes. And what are semantic changes? They are changes in meanings. So semantics is meanings while syntactic is structure. We'll get to the details later, but let us just understand broadly what semantic changes are. So changes in meanings of words over a course of time. So we all know that the meanings of various words have evolved over a period of time. And for example, Old English word for man was were, but it has fallen out of use except in horror films where the a compounded word like werewolf occasionally appears. So in Old English, man was called W-E-R-E, were, while the current usage of the same word has changed to M-A-N, man, but it still appears in certain horror movies, like there are werewolves and vampires, but werewolf in particular refers to man-wolf. So semantic changes are also to be understood as a part of philology and the evolution of language. Alright, so now we come to the last part of this presentation, which is word formation. Why we are taking this up? It is a stepping stone to understand how philologists discovered words, and now those words were clubbed, merged, discovered into new words, and this is also a part of evolution of human language, particularly the English language in this case. So just to give you a brief idea of how words were borrowed from other languages, it is said that through the Dutch, lot of American English has been formed. So Dutch people have been given the linguistic, they passed on the linguist legacy to Americans by and large. So there were certain Dutch terms which flooded into American English, like these are all mid-18th century terms like coleslaw, boss, or pit, or bedspread. All these words were basically Dutch origin and borrowed by American English people. Now, say for a word like how come, don't you say in an American interrogative way, it says how come. It's originated from the Dutch word hoekom. Hoekom means it's spelled as H-O-E-K-O-M, hoekom, and they refined it further, Americans refined it further into how come. Even words like Santa Claus, it's from the Dutch origin and it was a word called Sinterklaas, S-I-N-T-E-R-K-L-A-A-S, Sinterklaas, or which was similar form of Saint Nicholas. It was first recorded in American English in 1773. So you must understand that words have moved from one geographical location to the other, and that is also a part of what philologists understand, the family tree like we just called. So let us come to etymology, because word formations have their roots in the study of the origin and history of a word, which is called etymology. Now, etymology originates in itself from a Greek word, which is etymon, which means the original form, and logia, which means the study of. So, the study of the original form is called etymology. Now, you must understand that there are certain terminologies in etymology also, but this is going to be really interesting and very informative and the last part of the slide. So, let us sit through it just to understand how words are formed on the basis of etymology. So, first is coinage. Now, coinage is one of the least common processes of word formation in English. It is the invention of a totally new term. So, example, just saying that the company Google was formed from the word Googleplex. That's one way of studying the terminology in etymology, which is coinage. Second, we are talking about eponyms. Now, what are eponyms? These are new words based on the name of a person or a place, and it is just to denote what is the origin of the word, and it is to give a reference to that origin. So, say for example, the jeans that you wear, it has actually come from the Italian city of Genoa, where this particular type of cloth was first made. Hence the word jeans, from Genoa, a city in Italy. Now, third is borrowing. It is a technique in which you take over words from other languages. So, like I just said, that Übermensch from the German word. So, similarly, croissant from French word. The croissant you eat as a typical English breakfast in a lot of places. It's actually a French origin. Then the word tycoon. It's a Japanese origin, a business tycoon. The word has originated from Japan. Borrowing now also encompasses loan translation or loan club. So, what does it mean? It means that it is a direct translation of elements of a word into borrowing language. So, one word is directly translated into another language and it is called loan translation, hence the word loan. Now, for example, like I said, Übermensch has been borrowed from the German word Übermensch, which translates directly into Superman in English. Now, there are other words like, how do I put, say the word loan. Loan has been borrowed from the German word Lehenwort, Lehnwort. The pronunciation might differ from actual German in my case, but just to give you the spelling again, Lehnwort is directly translated from the German word Lehnwort, which translates into loan in English. Now, to compounding. Now, what is compounding? Compounding is joining of two separate words to produce a single new word. A word is also referred to as form. Example, book plus case resulted in bookcase. Sun plus burn resulted in sunburn. Text plus book, textbook. So all these, the process of clubbing two words into one single word or form is called compounding. Then we come to blending. Now, what is blending? Since the word blend in itself is self-explanatory, blending is the combination of two separate forms to produce a single new term. So, when I say the combination of two separate forms, it means two different words, like binary plus digit turned into bit, bi of the binary and it of digit. There are other words in the same formation process like smog. Smog will be smoke plus haze, smaze. Okay. Now clipping. Clipping is another form of word formation in which there is an element of reduction. What is that element of reduction? It is more apparent in the process described as clipping, in which a word of more than one syllable is reduced to a shorter form. Now, how do you reduce a word of more than one syllable to a shorter form? Like in the word advertisement, it is a word of more than one syllable. It is reduced to a shorter form as ad. Then the very common word that we use today, which is cab, I booked my cab, it is actually from the word cabriolet. Now, another type of clipping is called hypocorism, which is a process in which a longer word is reduced to a single syllable by adding y or ie. Example, when we say there's a Aussie boy or Aussie girl, it means they are from Australia. So the word originates from Australian and it has been reduced into a single syllable by adding y or ie and called Aussie. This process is called hypocorism. It is also a form of clipping. Now we come to back formation. Now back formation is a word of one type word where one type of word is reduced to form a word of another type. Example, from donation came the word donate, from babysitter came the word babysit. So again, reduction but back formation. This process is called back formation because in advertisement you picked, what did you pick? You picked a smaller reduction, you picked a smaller shorter form. In back formation you reduce the word to form another word. So if you have to say babysitter, you actually remove ter in the end and it comes out to be babysit. That is back formation. Come to conversion. So what is conversion? It is change in function of a word. When a noun which is used as a verb without any reduction. So a lot of us say the word wannabe. So wannabe has been derived from the word want to be, and this derivation in which words are clubbed where the noun to be used as a verb without any reduction. There is no reduction in the words here. It is called conversion. Next we come to acronym. Acronym is a very common word that we all understand. It simply refers to new words formed from the initial letters of a set of other words. Example, from compact disc came the word CD. So, initials. You're working on the initial letters of set of other words. Then comes derivation. It is the most common form of word formation process. How? The elements like un, elements like mis, miss, pre, pre, isms, all the isms, ism, ness, these are called derivation words and they are a part of word formation process. Example, you derive the word unhappy from happy by adding un. So that becomes derivation. There are other words like boyish. So it derives from the word boy and you add a suffix to it by adding ish, boyish. Then comes inflexes. Now what is inflexes? This is again very interesting. You must have noticed in a lot of movies, a lot of Hollywood stars happen to use inflexes to exaggerate or to assert the intensity of certain situation. For example, hallelujah. Hallelujah is a very Hebrew and Biblish word, and if someone happens to say in Hollywood, yeah, you must have heard these phrases like halle bloody luya. So this process of changing one word, incorporating another word in between that word is called inflexes. So inflexes is a type of affix that is incorporated inside another word in few specific languages. Then we come to Kamhu. Kamhu is very specific to Southeast Asian language. It is a language spoken, Kamhu, in Southeast Asia. And the specific process of inflexing in English to Kamhu is called Kamhu. So example, the verb to drill, you write it as C, they write it as SRNEE and it becomes a drill in Kamhu. Lastly, we come to multiple processes. Now this is the last and certainly very interesting. It is so multiple processes involves adding a suffix to an abbreviated word to form a new word. Now example, WASP is WASP, which actually referred to white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And the term, when we say a very waspish attitude or waspish attitude, where you add the suffix sh, it is a derivation process and it comes under the category of multiple processes. So adding a suffix to a word, say in this case you added sh, it became waspish. and it gained a suffix, and this is a part of derivation process. So with this we come to the end of today's PPT. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. There's a lot more to come and follow in understanding language, and I hope you stay tuned for the next lecture. Thank you for watching.